Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, well, actually not with me as always, my normal co-host, Matt, is actually out today. He is running the Ironman 70.3 in Ohio, so he could not be with me, but we've got a fill-in today, and you guys have met him before, Philip, who's been with us before. Philip, welcome to the show, man.
Welcome. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'm definitely excited about tonight's show. It's going to be very interesting. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Very excited about this, and I don't want to waste a lot of time with intros and everything, but I want to thank our sponsors, of course, and that's the Stave Restaurant out there in Millville, Kentucky, located on McCracken Pike. Chef Kyle Klacka just making some excellent food out there. So stop by and see those guys. Saturday night, they have live music out there. They've got their really cool, I call it the Treehouse deck. It's out there on the banks of Glens Creek. It's a lot of fun to hang out. They got the fire pits. Of course, I don't know in the summer if you want to sit by a fire pit, but in the fall and the spring, that's a lot of fun as well. But yeah, check those guys out. They're online, thestavekentucky.com, and then also on Instagram. So check those guys out. And then our other sponsor, 3 Chord Bourbon. We really appreciate their sponsorship. Ari Sussman, their master blender, just doing an incredible job with the product. The owner, Neil Giraldo, just 2 great guys. We had them on the show last year, and we really appreciate all that they do for us. And with that said, I almost said Matt. Oh, man, that's going to be tough today, Phil. And yeah, man. All right, Phil, if you want to tell everybody who we have with us today. Yes. So today we have Toby and Julie Curtsinger from the Netflix Docuseries Heist, the Bourbon King. We're definitely honored to have you all here, and we're ready to dive into the story and find out, what was, said on TV that wasn't true, what, from the docuseries, if there was something maybe they didn't get quite right, or, we're just here to listen and let you all tell your story.
Yeah. And I like Philip said, I mean, I really appreciate you all joining us today. I know there's been a lot of interest in the show. It's, I think I saw that it's the highest downloaded show right now on Netflix, if that's correct. So obviously there's a lot of interest in the show that you all were part of. And we just really appreciate you being with us. And really, our show is just conversational. We'd like to sit around. Normally, we sit around and we review 2 or 3 different bourbons and ryes because we have master distillers on the show, and we talk about their products and we review them. So tonight, we're going to do it just a little differently. We are going to have some drinks, though. We all have something poured up because of the wonderful selection here. We are live in the Bourbon Life studios, otherwise known as my basement. So we do have some things to choose from. So we are going to enjoy some bourbon, and to me, that's what really bourbon is all about, is being able to share it with old friends and new friends, and having some good conversations. That's really, really what we'd like to do. Before we really get into the show part of it, I like to tell people if I have a relationship, or if I know the people or know my guests, and we have never met before, but you guys Philip has a little bit of a connection to you guys. So Philip, tell everybody a little bit about that.
Yeah. So if anybody that's watched the docuseries, they saw that Toby played softball all the time, and that's where I grew up, at the softball field. Toby played with my family, my dad, my uncles. He worked with my grandparents at the distillery. So, there's a history there that I've definitely known of Toby and who he is, and the legendary home runs that he hits in softball.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. So I'm just happy that we have that connection. So that's really cool. Because we're in Lexington, you guys are in Frankfurt, but Philip is originally from Frankfurt. So I'll tell you what, Julie, Toby, if you guys want to take a second, just kind of introduce yourselves though, and just tell everybody a little bit about who you are.
Well, I'm Toby Curtsinger. I'm happy to be here tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to get on here and talk a little bit with you guys. And but I, born in Versailles, and grew up in Anderson County. Went to a small high school down 62, Western Anderson, which was K through 12, and I think it was probably a little over 360 people total.
Okay. Wow.
So yeah, my junior year, I think was it my first period. I had like a PE class, but I helped the basketball coach Glenn Juris time with it was kindergarten, first grade, and then it was second and third. So it was kind of goofy, but I knew everyone in my school by first name.
Wow.
From kindergarten.
Wow.
He was the top 9 of his class.
Yeah, I graduated with 26 people.
Did you really? Okay. Wow. Well, my dad's from Pike County, so that's kind of the same kind of story that, grew up in a school down there at Hellier, went to Hellier High School. I guess he actually had a high school by the time he was there, but he was younger. Everybody was lumped together. Yeah. Julie, what about you?
Hi, I'm Julie. Thank you all for having us. I'm from Frankfort, born and raised there, grew up there. Toby and I met in, 1990?
It was early part of the 90s.
Yeah, long time ago. We've been married for 20 years. We have 2 beautiful children.
Great.
And we are walking a walk together that's a journey, and we are not done with it yet. So we're very excited that you all want to have us on today. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. And again, thank you for being here with us. And we've got you a little something poured up over there as well. So so you're not left out with the guys.
Yes, I'm enjoying too. It's a very good choice for me. Thank you.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that. So Philip had a really good question when we were talking earlier. So ask it.
So from the docuseries, this would be the good icebreaker question. Who is Moonshine Mike and how is he tied to this story and all?
Man,
we don't know.
I really don't know. I've had a lot of people ask me that. I think when they were doing a lot of their, their background look at a lot of things, kind of look at the cultures that, form around, which are the distilleries, but other things, I think a lot of guys, not around for this area, the big hype of moonshiners.
Right.
Because, right. Playing ball, which I played ball with a lot of guys from a lot of states. And, a lot from like Eastern Kentucky, and it was common moonshine at the ball field.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that kind of intrigued them a little bit. So I think they were just kind of going out, because I personally don't know the guy. Never met him.
Well, and that's the thing, like I explained to you all, we worked with the producer and director for almost 2 years getting this story to take place. So
sure.
It's, a lot of people, when it first came out, they're like, we're not going to watch it. It's bad about you all. They thought it was going to be something negative. I said, no, this is a story about our family. And we did this. We wanted a part in this.
Yep.
And number one, when we were contacted, the main concern to me and Toby was, to our kids, do you all want to do this? If they had said no, we would not be sitting here.
Yeah.
They wanted a voice.
Good.
They wanted to speak. Good. And we've been that journey with them. They're great kids. I'm not sure how we did that, but I put them in therapy because it was tough. We fell hard.
Sure.
And they were a part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we appreciate you coming and sharing with us, obviously, the story, and we know it's hard, and we'll talk some more about that. So talking about the show. The Bourbon King, they started out, it's kind of funny because it starts with 1999 for some reason. There's just like a big flash on the screen, 1999, but it talks about you playing softball. But was there something significant? Because you didn't start working at the distillery really you'd already been there, right? Mm-hmm. You started in
December 28th of 88.
Yeah, so you'd already been there. So was there any significance to 1999?
99 is when we met, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. 1999 is when we met.
Yes. Okay, all right. Then that's that, because I was trying to piece that together, because I know they talked about softball, and then they talked about you all getting married. They showed your video, from your wedding, which was very sweet. I think we all have those videos laying around somewhere.
Right. Who would have thought that our wedding photo would be the main Netflix advertisement?
That's still really weird.
Right. My daughter grew up loving Twilight. So we've laid in bed and couch and watched Twilight. So I actually took a picture of when Twilight was number 4 and we were number 5. And I said, Isabella, come here, look. She said, what, Mom? I said, look at this picture. Did you ever think your mom and dad's wedding photo would be right beside Edward and Bella?
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy.
Yeah, that is. And it is. Mm-hmm. I looked last night, as a matter of fact, and it was for this past week. It was the number 4 downloaded show. So obviously, there's a lot of interest about this show. There's no question about it, and about your story. So kind of getting back to that story. So you started working at Buffalo Trace in 88. And there was a moment at the very beginning of the show, they're interviewing your parents. And I'm sure your parents went through a lot with you guys, but your mom said, it happens at the distilleries, that there's a culture. Can you talk about that just a little bit? I mean, can you?
Well, yeah, like, when I started, I was 19 years old.
Right.
And like I said, just a little while ago, I grew up out in the country of Anderson County. And the way things have, progressed now, with the cell phones and, there's restaurants everywhere. It wasn't like that. I had relatives that lived in Frankfort. We visited, every so often, but
sure.
Mainly, I fished and I hunted all the time. And, so when I got out of school, I worked with my uncle for a little while. Then I decided I had a partial baseball scholarship to Lindsey Wilson College down in Columbia. So I kind of followed back up on that, and I went down for I went for a semester, and I really didn't like, because I was kind of I kind of got homesick.
Sure.
And so it was during it was Christmas break, and I had a friend of mine who called me up and said, "Hey, I'm gonna go to Frankfort to put my applications in some places you want to go." I said, "Yeah, I'll ride down with you." So we go to the unemployment office, and there was a girl that graduated ahead of us that was taking the applications. And I was just sitting there. She was like, "Do you want to fill some out too?" And I was like, "Yeah." I said, "I'm not doing anything else." So I think it was 3 of them. One of them was for ancient age. So later that night, Mom asked, said, "Well, what'd you do today?" And I told her, I said, "I went down with my buddy AC, and we filled some applications out." And she was like, "Well, where at?" And I told her ancient age, and she was like, "Well, that's funny," because she was a materials manager at King's Daughters Hospital in Frankfurt.
Oh, okay.
She was like, "Well, the respiratory therapist, his nurse, her husband." So 2 days later, I got a call for a physical.
Nice. Yeah, very nice. So you had a little bit of an inside connection there. But your mom, but it's funny on the show because she just talked about in terms of the culture, and you talked about it before we started recording a little bit. And Philip, even we talked about this too, that there is, or used to be anyway, at the distilleries, that there is a little bit of a culture where, people know where the good barrels are, right, Philip? Yep. And you talked about that.
So living in Frankfort, and like Toby said, it was ancient age. That's what everybody knew it as in Frankfurt. It's just ancient age distillery. It was just a thing. It wasn't, nobody went there and visited. It wasn't, it wasn't a popular thing. It was just the distillery where you go see Santa Claus. When they had the train. The train and the elf toy shop set up. That's what it was. The smell, it's just, that's the smell of Frankfurt. You just smell the distillery.
Sure, yeah.
And around town, you talk to people that's worked there, and that's what they did. They'd find their honey barrels. They'd have it hidden somewhere in the warehouse, and everybody knew they could go taste it and get a drink.
So, Toby, when you started working there, was that, I'm assuming you were kind of exposed to that kind of culture.
Yeah,
is that right?
My first day, I worked in the re-gauge, I believe it was. No, the cistern room, I'm sorry, with Leonard, which I think Leonard's passed away now. He was the A man in the cistern room, so he filled all the barrels. Okay. He cut the bourbon in the morning before it went to the barrels.
Gotcha.
And so I worked the hoist there that morning, and then after all the barrels got filled, we went up to the warehouse to kind of help put them up. And here I'm a 19-year-old kid, not really, been around a lot of people.
Right.
I'm not a big crowd kind of person.
Right.
And I'm sitting in here with all these older guys. A lot of these guys, they were good guys, but they didn't know me. And there was an older gentleman. I know he's passed away now. He was from Lawrenceburg. Charlie was the guy that went around every warehouse, every floor. He knew where the good barrel was.
Gotcha.
And at the time, there was some whiskey that they had was 1984 that they'd made. That was the top. Until all that got bottled, that's everywhere that was the barrels that they would hit.
Right.
And a lot of people, it's like, oh well, whiskey. No, if you ever worked in a distillery and you got to taste, which, it's pretty stout. You take 3-ounce little white Solo cups. You take about 4 of those, at 140 proof.
Yeah.
That's pretty stout.
Kind of like what I'm drinking, 136 proof.
That's a man to drink that kind of stuff.
136.6 proof, as a matter of fact, this morning. So,
wow.
Today, it's afternoon now, so it's okay.
Yeah, it
but we go up, and Charlie's passing all these little cups out, and I'm sitting here with all the guys, and he's like, well, here you go, son, here's yours. And I'm like, man, I don't want that. And he was like, no, here's yours. I said, man, I don't want that. I said, I don't want any whiskey.
Yeah.
And I look around, and there's like 15 guys just sitting there, they all just kind of look at me, kind of weird, tobacco spit running in their face. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I said, I might want to take a drink of this. So
sure.
because I'm sitting there thinking, they're checking me out. They're getting a feel, see if if I was going to be a rat or anything. So I turned it up, and man, it was like a blowtorch down my, because I never drank anything.
Yeah, that's definitely a rough way to start.
Yeah, it is. So were you a beer drinker, or did you just not drink?
I really didn't drink that much. I mean, when you're younger, which I'd been around some parties where younger, 13, 14, you sneak over there and nobody's looking to get a glass out of a keg or sneak some beer out of your uncle's car or something, but nothing to that. And as it went on, and I got to make friends as time went on. And, it was a daily thing, because there was guys that would, they call them, they would, when we were putting entry up, would check for wormholes in the barrels. They got the little cedar chips.
Yeah.
They'd roll those aside, and there was one guy would drink that White Dog all day. And, I don't say anybody drinks that.
I don't either.
But, there was a lot of times they had to pull him to the side. But, the thing is, and I don't make that sound bad, but, the supervisor, Ronnie's passed away now too, but Ronnie worked in the warehouse. Then he got a company. But Ronnie would drink probably over a fifth a day.
Oh my gosh!
But in the weird thing about that, a fifth would put me down in the hospital.
Right.
Guys like that could drink it and walk a straight line,
right?
Because they've done it every day.
Yeah.
But the work got done. Nobody got hurt.
Right.
And nobody told on each other. It was like a family. You didn't tell on people.
Right. So it was, like what your mom said and what we just talked about earlier. It really was kind of the culture that, you worked hard, you got the job done, but then the reward was the fact that you could take a drink,
and
you could have a drink or two.
It was kind of like the not a dirty, it was like the secret that they knew, but they never.
Nobody,
And as far as like thermos full of whiskey, they didn't care about that.
Right.
And
that's not to pick, and I'm not saying that just because saying, oh yeah, the old ancient age distillery or now Buffalo Trace, that was only there because, I've got friends, and I'm sure I
do too.
Yeah. So that it's something that happens.
I was playing softball in the New Haven Marathon. Once there used to be a big tournament before the Nationals. And one of my buddies from Georgetown, not Dusty, another guy, he was like, hey man, come over. So this guy works over here at Jim Beam. He said that he's got some whiskey. And I go over there, and this guy's got a bunch of mason jars, and it's straight out of the barrel.
Yeah.
And, everybody down there was drinking and having a good time. But, it's just it's just one of them things.
I've got friends, who have friends that work in different distilleries across the state. And, I have gone to parties, and somebody shows up with a milk jug. Seriously, it's just somebody's taking a milk jug or old water, big like gallon jug of water and filled it up with bourbon straight out of the barrel. So it happens. And obviously as a new guy starting out, you didn't want to be the one that said, I'm not gonna be that guy that, that doesn't participate, because you obviously don't want to be the guy. You said earlier that there were stories about what happened to guys like that. Is that right?
Yeah. There was one of the guys I worked with. He was like, yeah, man. He said, you don't want to be one of them guys that they all kind of look at. He said there was a guy here that went and told one of the supervisors that there was some drinking going on in the warehouse. He said, and they were telling me a couple of days later he fell out of a second-story window, and another guy had a barrel fall on him. I'm like, what? Because when you're putting entry up, and a lot of the warehouses were like 3 tiers high. See, Buffalo Trace, some of those bigger warehouses were 6 high.
6, yeah. Right.
And I was actually in the rails once, and the guy let one of the barrels, he didn't put the chalk down, it fell off the the top tier 6 high, and it blew both heads out of the barrel.
Oh man,
it shook the whole warehouse.
I can't imagine.
But if you got the guy in front of you, like, hey, hold on, this I got to cut this barrel to make sure the bung's up. And you get over in the rails and you're cutting it, and he slings that barrel back there. You got to think that's 550 pounds coming at you.
Yep.
It'll cut your fingers off or anything.
That's a lot of people don't understand. An empty barrel by itself is probably 150, 160, but you put 53 gallons of distillate in there, and you're talking
550 pounds.
50 pounds, and that's a deadly weapon right there. So, but yeah, I can understand obviously that you're the new guy, and you hear these stories about guys that don't participate in the culture. So
I want to be a teammate.
That makes perfect sense.
It sounds like to me that we've just found out the myth of the angel share. It's not the angel share. It's the employee share.
Right.
That's why these bottles or these barrels come up a little short. It's not the angel share.
Oh my gosh. So fast forward a little bit in the show, and we're at 2008. and you play softball. You love softball. It's a big thing. You're married to your wife, Julie. You have 2 kids now. So you kind of get to that point where things have to change a little bit. So can you talk about that? The decision you left something that you kind of loved behind a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, and I played softball ever since I was probably 5 years old. We played church league softball over in Anderson County. I got from that, and it was always, it was something that, I don't know, it kind of came naturally, I guess, because I was around it, and I got where I could do pretty good at it. And I went from, I got out of high school, and I started playing with some guys that were like 5 or 6 years older than me that I went to school with. I played with them for a year or two, and then I kind of got bumped up to a pretty good team, to guys that I always looked up to. One of the guys, a real good friend of mine's dad, Junior, the best ball player I ever seen in my life, and a great man, would do anything in the world for you. And Junior was a head mechanic at Wild Turkey, and there was another guy that I got to play with, Stevie, which worked in the lab at Wild Turkey, which, a lot of people that you played ball with in that area either worked at distilleries or, knew someone.
Right.
But, it went from that, and then, with those guys, you got a little more exposure. Then I got on some better teams, and then, it just kept getting, a little bit better as far as competition. And then it got to the level where, I was traveling all the time. And, when Julie and I first started dating, she went everywhere with me. She's been to California. We went out and played in California.
Wow.
All the surrounding states a lot, which I know a lot of the teams now go a lot of places. But, I mean, as far as I've been, kind of like the Johnny Cash song, I've been everywhere, man.
So, and a lot of people don't understand, Phil, we talked about that earlier before we started recording. I mean, people, when you hear softball, you think about, some people would think about, oh, it's just a bunch of old guys out, passing time drinking beer. Yeah. They don't understand
the
significance.
And the softball culture in Frankfurt, even, it was a big deal, especially all through the 90s to the early 2000s. There'd be tournaments. Well, if you didn't have something to do in town and there was a softball tournament, you went down there, couldn't find a parking spot. I mean, the place is packed. Teams show up and,
in buses, you said,
in tour buses, they all, they've spent thousands of dollars on their uniforms. Like, it is a legit big deal. And so I think a lot of people would, even watch, the show and be like, oh, he just played softball, oh, okay. But softball it was a really big deal.
Yeah. There's a show on Apple TV. It's called Ted Lasso. I don't know if you guys have ever watched that or not, but it's about, he's a college football coach from the United States that gets hired to go to England and become a soccer coach in one of the top Premier League teams. And it's just kind of funny. I forgot where I was going with that story.
Probably talking about how he looked at football and they brought him over for soccer and he probably didn't think much of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the thing. He doesn't think much of it. So he doesn't understand the significance of what, soccer in England is. It's huge. Right. I mean, it's a thing that everybody loves, everybody grows up doing, and they don't understand the significance of it. So, I mean, obviously that was something that you, and one of his players, that's what I was going to say. He always says, they call it football, right? He's like, football is life. That's all he says is football. Football is life. So, I mean, softball was obviously a huge part of your life, right?
And I played with some guys that was like that, like softball is my life. And which, man, I love playing. I did.
Sure.
I liked the camaraderie with a lot of guys. I like meeting new people. I like going on the weekends and, I like the competition because, when I was in school, our basketball team, my senior year, we won 5 games. We got beat by everybody.
Oh, man.
And one of the things, I hated losing.
Sure.
And I really believe when you look at a lot of your pro players and you look back, I think in a lot of them's career, kind of like Anthony Davis at UK.
Yeah.
His high school team, his senior year only won like 5 games. I think that gives you a better drive on things.
I would agree with that. Definitely. So there came a point though where you had to make a decision that I'm looking at you, Julie. you may have been at least the way the show portrays it,
and it is, yes.
Is that a decision had to be made because, like I said, your dad, you got a job, you got 2 kids, your wife is as a real estate attorney. I know the real estate world is insane,
and a gym owner.
And that's right.
And that's the thing, is that I was running 2 businesses, 2 kids.
Okay. Yeah.
Toby was playing, not only leaving home on a Thursday or Friday sometimes and being gone until 1 or 2 a.m. Sunday or Monday morning and then going to work. Then he would play a team in Frankfurt to where he was gone 1 night a week.
Sure.
Then he had to practice during that week. He was never around us. I was picking kids up from school, taking kids to school, trying to work both jobs. And I finally, it was destroying our marriage. I said, I can't do this.
Sure.
And, as he said, I've told him, my life changed when we got married. He did not.
Yeah.
He kept playing ball. He kept running with his buddies.
Sure.
I was the one taking care of the weight on my shoulders.
I got you.
So that was the point when I'm like, okay, either you, as much as I say, quit softball, it was a decision that we had to make to take care of our family.
Yeah. So because of that, I mean, I'm sure that was a difficult decision for you at that point in time. I mean, you love your family, you love your wife, but it was a big part of what you were doing. I mean,
it was, and then it wasn't.
Okay.
Let me see if I can explain that. It was because I knew everything was about to wind down that I'd been doing all my life, but it really wasn't a big decision when it come, with my kids and my wife.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't worth that.
Right. I completely understand. As a dad, I understand what you mean, but yet you were giving up something that was a big part of who you
all
were.
My life. Yeah.
So that kind of lays the groundwork then for you, and that's what we'll kind of get into in part 2 when we jump back. But kind of laid the groundwork for you because I was watching the document. I watched it again yesterday, and when they do that part, I'm like, holy shit! It's like I completely understand where this guy was, mentally, because you get up, you go to work, you work all day, you come home, you got kids, you do the dishes or you do the housework, you do the lawn work, you mow the grass, you do this, and then you're exhausted, you go to bed. And I know, Julie, that that was your life. I completely understand that and respect that, but. Toby, I see your side in terms of how you probably felt.
Well, and a lot there toward the end there, when I was over in processing for the last 10 years, it was kind of a little bit of a routine, like January, February, and March, there wasn't anything going on. And see, I'm an avid hunter, so I was looking for spring turkey season.
Right.
So, and there was always something that could be done in building. And see, my main job there in building 3 was I made all the cordials. The Firefly Sweet Tea?
Oh, yeah.
I made all that.
Gotcha.
I started all the flavored vodkas, the Lejeune Herb Saint, the Peychaud bitters, all that. I made every bit of that.
Wow. Okay.
And the moonshines that they made.
Yeah.
I was in on all that. I started all that. So then the weekends I'd work up in the single barrel, but I worked 10 hours a day, 7 days a week for 4 months.
Wow.
And then I'd come home, like I said, and Julie cooks sometimes, but I do 99.9% of the cooking.
That's good.
The house.
That's a good deal for you, right? But
that's how it is in my house.
Is it? See, we're opposite. My wife does all the cooking almost, and I do all the dishes, which I hate.
Well, and we're with the business, but
with our schedule, I didn't get home till 7:30 or 8 at night.
And that was another thing, which we'll probably get into. But when all this went down, not only was she was a real estate for realty, which dropped her. She was the fitness pro to country club. They dropped her.
Yeah.
And then her business, and it was, so she was really busy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we had every member walk in and pretty much cancel their membership the Saturday after he got in trouble that Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we can definitely get.
I'm sorry to bring it up right now.
Well, no, you're all right, man. This, like I said
Very
earlier,
laid back.
This is a conversation, man, and you can.
I'm about out of Elmer tea.
Well, I think on that note, we probably need to take a little break. That's right. Take a little break, get us a little refill, and then we can jump back in and kind of talk about the next stage of what the show and how things kind of progress from there. So everybody just sit tight, and we'll be back with more with Julie and Toby Curtsinger from the Netflix show Heist, the Bourbon King, in just a minute. Spirits of French Lick crafts their spirits using only the finest agricultural product that has defined character, following their motto, respect the grain. They lead the way in representing the quality of the Hoosier artisan distilling process while paying tribute to its inseparable past. By implementing best practices from those early times, combined with modern touches, Spirits of French Lick has created a truly unique place in the industry. Spirits of French Lick products are distributed throughout Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri, and can also be purchased online through Sealbox at sealbox.com. Visit spiritsoffrenchlick.com to learn more information, and make sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the second round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, not as always, but with me this time is my good friend, Philip. Philip, how you doing over there, man?
I'm doing good. I'm ready to dive right into the second session. I'm definitely interested to hear about this part. This is the start of it all.
Yeah, man, we're having a great conversation today. You want to tell everybody who we have with us?
Yep. If you're just joining us, we have Julie and Toby Curtsinger from the Netflix Docuseries The Heist, the Bourbon King. And we're getting ready to dive into session 2 about how Toby got wrapped up in the actual, selling of the bourbon.
Yeah. So Toby, the first round we talked a lot, about who you were and the fact, you're working at what was then Ancient Age and now Buffalo Trace. The kind of the culture, which is not just prevalent there or was prevalent there, but we talked about other distilleries, obviously, that's kind of a culture where people were taking samples, drinking whiskey, drinking bottles, whatever. You're at a point in your life, you're married, you got 2 kids, you have a wonderful wife, obviously, but you just given up, you stopped playing softball with a very big part of your life at that point. Things were kind of, I don't want to say mundane, but you're kind of going through the routine. And I said, I identified with that because I feel, I have felt the same way. But then something kind of happened. There was a pivotal moment you talked about. It was in the show that a friend of yours was over and having a little bit of bourbon. Can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah. It was actually a guy that I used to work with that no longer worked at the distillery anymore, and he'd been doing a little yard work for us. And I fixed dinner one night, and I told him, I was like, "Hey man, you come on up and eat with us a little bit." So we were sitting there eating, and then we had an after meal cocktail, or not cocktail, but drink. Sure. So when he was like, "Man," he said, "that's pretty good stuff." He said, "I've kind of heard of that." And he said, "Do you got any more?" So I gave him a couple bottles. I said, "Here you go, man. Me and your friends." I said, because,
Sure.
At that moment, things that, I had where I played ball and, family members, it was like, I'd give them stuff.
Right.
I mean,
Sure.
I gave them a ton of stuff. And, just kind of go back, when I was working in shipping and things, we had bottles that were given to us by supervisors. And there's a little thing which I want to touch on. It was I was always told there was a breakage tax break that the distilleries get.
Sure.
So I think that's how a lot of that was kind of covered over or smoothed over.
Right.
It was allotted into the breakage tax break.
Gotcha.
But it was that, on that deal that, a lot of times, like, people I played ball with, it was some other things, maybe some, other items besides bourbon, but
sure.
So he asked, so I gave him 2 bottles, and then I don't know, it was like later on that night, he came back to the house, and he was like, man, he said, I let some people that I know try this, and they loved it. They want some of it. And I'm like, well, I said, I'll give them a couple bottles. I said, because that's,
Sure.
you like it, I'll hook you up.
Well, like we're doing here. I mean, you guys come over and we're having a good conversation, and you're sharing bourbon with people,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, and just like just like in the documentary, he was like, well, they we'll know what you got, and that's why I got a little bit. And he was like, all right, well, how much do you want? I said, man, I'm not getting in. I said, I'll give you a few bottles of stuff. I said, I don't want to get into that. I
Sure.
said, I know some people that are doing that at the distillery, and I said, I don't want to get into that. And at the time, we were kind of strapped.
Sure.
And that's, that's what I want to kind of, let people know too. Cause I'm not, if I can say this right, I live in the real world.
Right. Right.
And there's a ton of people that work at that distillery that are paycheck by paycheck. I mean, that's just the way.
There's a ton of people in this,
world. That's right.
Overall,
you're right. And I'm not saying it's
not
not a bad, I mean, it was it was a great job. It,
Sure.
like I said, it put the roof over my kid's head and it helped feed us. But, there's time, things pop up, and when you're strapped and all of a sudden you have a guy drop a wad of cash and say, I'll take everything you got.
It's very tempting.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and just like I said, when the devil comes at you, he doesn't come at you, in a pitchfork and a red cape.
Right.
He comes in what you're desiring, what you need the most.
Sure.
And, when he dropped that, it's like, I allowed myself to be deceived on it. And then, it just snowballed after that. Then these dudes were very rich people, some lawyers, some doctors that I didn't know at the time. And later on in the road, I found out who they were.
Right.
And as it got on, it was just boom, boom. And I just fell into it, and I could see where I could, actually get ahead. We could get ahead on a lot of things. And,
sure.
And, a lot of people I've heard say, well, Julie should have known this and that. Now, listen, in the way, you're married.
Sure.
There's things that your wife probably doesn't know. And she,
Is she in the room?
No, I mean,
she's here in the house.
And there's probably
Toby,
things, and there's things that she probably has, that she hadn't disclosed with me. But the thing with
I get it, yeah.
She knew, I'd bring bottles home, but
I never questioned that.
No,
because he worked at a distillery.
And everybody
around us did it.
Bingo.
Yeah.
The people I work with, you'd go to their house. Well, hell, most of them had more stuff than I had.
Yeah, right.
And and we entertained a lot of people. I like entertaining people. You come to my house, we cook, we'd have a pool, we'd have pool parties and things like that. And it just, it just kept going. And then, then the money got more.
Right.
They kept offering more. And then, when I got out of shipping and stuff, I said, I'm out because it got too hot.
Right.
And then I was working in processing, and I was actually out of the game, if it's what you want to call it.
Right.
So, then the 2013 stuff went down. And, it all went through. Then, all these people just started just, man, I need this. And which, you make that choice, and then, which, a lot of the dealings I had was prior to 2013.
Right.
So when all that went through, then, that's when
it changed a lot.
Yeah, it changed a lot.
Sure.
And then
so was there a point prior to 2013? Because, you've been working at the distillery since 88. Was there a point where you're just like, after your friend, asked, hey, can you get this? Can you get this? And people started offering, you had to make a decision that, yes, this is a road that I'm going to go down. Was there like a pivotal moment where you finally said, yeah, I'm going to do this? Or was it just it just happened?
Well, it kind of was.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can explain this right.
Sure.
I thought about it for a little while. Then, I'm sitting here thinking, and it's like I said, this was the time I was in the shipping department. And so I did. I went down that road. And then, it got to the point where, there was a few other people that were doing like really heavy sales. And it was starting to kind of get a little noticeable, but it always got covered over. Nothing was ever brought up. There was never no incident reports or anything.
Yeah.
So when I bid out into shipping, there were still some guys over when I was in processing. So they knew that I had connections. So the majority of the stuff that you've seen or everyone's seen that was turned in that Pat had on his meeting in behind, like a lot of the bottles and the cases, that actually came. I was like, that's what I was trying to say. I was kind of the facilitator on that.
Right.
I arranged for all those sales and stuff. And then it went from that. Then the 2013 hit. And that's when it went through the roof. And then, I guess they locked everything down and stuff. So really it was kind of hard to get things like that.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask. When you first started this, you got to the point people were wanting stuff. How hard was it? In terms of security to get, I know Julie's over there like laughing, kind of shaking her head. Like, so, how hard?
And that's a good question. And I kind of, I watched all 3 episodes on Heist. And if you haven't watched it, you need to watch it. And the one thing that I picked out were two things. 2 of them, there was always, an anonymous person, but lack of security. And, the time I spent at Buffalo Trace, which, like I said, great place to work, great people. The security was very laxed. There was people when I was in shipping, there would be people that you'd see walking around the shipping area. You're like, who's that? I'd see people in numerous vehicles pull up and start loading cases in their car.
Sure.
I've seen it all. I've seen supervisors on a Friday load their trunks of their cars down going to parties, or I got friends, and you're sitting there looking at this and nothing ever comes up, missing or anything like that. Then you hear about the time. You're like, well, I guess everybody's done it. So and that's not an excuse to do it.
Sure,
but
right. You're not trying to excuse what happened, but everybody,
everybody did
it was kind of it was a culture. And again, we talked about that earlier. Not necessarily just at Ancient Age Buffalo Trace.
Well, and one thing I wanted to ask too, so in the documentary, it brings up that Eagle Rare was a big one that was getting moved at that time. And me, as someone that didn't really get into bourbon until 2018, I'm like,
you're a millennial, man.
Yeah. Well, and I'm like, well, in 2018,
you might be a Gen Zer. I don't even know. You might qualify as a Gen Z guy, man. I don't know.
I'm like, well, I could still get Eagle Rare at pretty much any liquor store for around $30 a bottle. So was it that you were able to get it to them cheaper than what they could just go buy it for?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Man, that's anything when you do it, when it goes down, if you want black market or anything like that, anything's always cheaper.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because that's what I was thinking. I was like, well, why are these people, especially if they're, wealthy people, like why are they worried about doing it illegally when they could just go to the store and buy it?
Well, but that's let me touch on that, Toby, because you said black market. So, and I don't want to get really into the secondary market, but everybody knows there's a secondary market for bourbon, and Van Winkle, 23 years used to go for $2,500. It's probably going for more than that now. Who knows? Prices are crazy. There's bottles that are going for $5,000 out there right now. So, talking about Eagle Rare, because I love Eagle Rare. It's a $30 bottle when you can find it now. But years ago, so was it something that people were actually they just wanted it in large quantities, and that was something that you were able to provide them?
Well, not only that, it was just kind of where it talks about people would contact me and say, hey, I got this.
Oh,
I got that. And that's what I got, because when I would get, messages from people, hey, man, I need this or I need that. And I'm like, man, I don't have access.
Right.
I was like, when something comes available, I'll let you know.
Right.
And a lot of people knew that because, everyone at Distillery. Now, if I can explain the Eagle Rare with the deal with that, the guy that he brought that to my house. He didn't load that in a truck for me. He showed up at my house higher than a kite,
knowing that Toby could get rid of it.
Yes,
because that's what people knew.
He knew I could get.
All right, so it was he saw the opportunity. He didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah, he knew,
but he was like, I could take this to Toby. Toby could probably
he
get
knew
rid of it
because he worked second shift in my building under me.
Okay, so yeah.
And
gotcha.
and I don't know where I was.
She was in the bathtub.
It took place.
He pulled up, and I heard a noise out back, and I looked out, and I was like, "What in the hell are you doing?"
But now that he's told the story, he was afraid that I'd walk out and see what was taking place.
I said, you can't do this. But they kind of make it look like I was. See, he never got charged anything.
No.
But he tried to make it look. But he was in this maintenance truck, a Ford Ranger.
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding you. It was so loaded down when I made him pull out. The bumper was dragging the road. And it looked like two balloons on the back tires. And he cut a lock, come out Lewis Ferry and come up Wilkerson Boulevard. I told him, I said, I cannot believe you've done that. There was probably Case Eagle Rare broke all.
I was going to say, I'm sure.
I bet everybody was happy picking. I said, look at this. They had to fall off there, man.
Had to have. That's crazy. But the fact that you're able to, that people were curious about that. So let me ask you though about like the Van Winkle, because nowadays obviously that's a huge thing. People want the bottles. So back then the bottles, you could buy a bottle of 23-year-old Van Winkle for
$113.
Yeah, right. So but people weren't paying that. It was a lot more, I'm assuming, right? Because
it was what?
It was a lot more than, no, it was less than that. Okay. All right. That's what I wanted to kind of clarify, because I was confused if people were actually paying the, okay. All right.
Speak up. Don't just shake your head. Nobody can see that.
No, it wasn't that. I probably won't tell you what, but.
That's okay. No, that's fine.
But one thing I want to touch on with the Eagle Rare.
Yeah.
And I'll go and give you a number, because they even said it, but it was 89 cases.
Wow.
All right.
Wow.
All right, okay,
Wow.
but there was never a report of missing Eagle Rare bottles.
That's what I don't get.
Well, the whole thing Toby was charged for, there's never any report of that, which I know we're going there later.
We'll get to that, but That's what I don't.
That's what I said because I was like, that was never even reported missing. How did they get? Okay.
Yeah.
But you being an attorney and you're looking at 89 cases of Igor and there's 6 bottles to a case.
Right.
And it comes up missing because the way he done it, they scanned it going into the bottling truck for the end of the day, but it didn't come off the truck. Because one of the guys in shipping, he told me, he was like, well, because me and him talked because I was asking him about when the 2013 went down. He was like, well, he's like, I was wondering what happened to that. I was like, how did they not look where that pallet went?
Yeah. I mean, seriously, that's
almost, it was like 105 cases on a pallet of that.
Wow.
And how do you not realize
that's
it?
what because I'm sitting here looking at that and I'm like, I cannot believe, but the way he done that, man, if you would walk through what he done, I still can't believe he done it.
I can't either. I mean, that's crazy. But that's I think a key point to me and something I was wondering because in the show they're talking about, Pappy Van Winkle. And yes, now, 23-year-old Pappy is going for $2,500 on the secondary and 20-year-old's going for $2,200. And well, I mean, there's been no question about that. It between Anthony Bourdain and this situation. I mean, there's obviously been a huge increase, but when you were selling it, you weren't selling these bottles for, I mean, it wasn't $1,000, $2,000 for a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle. It was a discounted price from what normal retail really was.
Yes.
So, okay.
That like really makes, that narrows it down, makes so much more sense.
It does. I know. It's like, that's why.
Yeah. When I'm watching it on TV, I'm like,
it's like, I don't remember this being a big thing.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
why when somebody in 2013 would they pay $2,000 for a bottle when they can just go buy it?
Right. Well, and it's like the story that, Toby did sell a couple of bottles of Van Winkle. And, the guy that received that property from Toby, do you not think that he knew it was stolen?
They knew it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So he gave Toby money for those bottles. Part of his plea deal was that he paid this guy back. The guy received stolen property. The guy was not charged for receiving stolen property, and we had to pay him $1,800 back.
No, you talking about? Well,
you know what I'm.
Well,
who
no,
I'm
you
talking
can
about.
say his name.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Nope. I know.
They paid him $2,150 back.
Oh, $2,150. But again, if why didn't they go after him?
Yeah, because he knew what he was.
He knew what he was doing.
So let's kind of touch on that because this whole situation. I mean, it's built on demand. I mean, it's built on clientele.
Right.
It's built on people. I mean, you weren't. Yes, you were doing something wrong, and
yes.
you admit that,
I was.
and you acknowledge that. There's no question about it. But you can't have you can't have a crime without. Well, you can't have a situation where you don't have other willing participants, right? So there were other people, like you said, that were participating, that were buying, and your clientele was
a lot of people. Were
and what you ought to understand, they sought him.
And
he would come into my gym and they'd be like, "Hey, man, can you get me this and this?" And they would seek him.
It wasn't just me; there was other people down there too.
Sure, but and we'll get to that in the third round. We'll talk about how that kind of has all played out. But you've got a pretty exclusive clientele.
They wanted a list.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Oh, yeah, you didn't know that?
For him to make a plea deal, they said, right, make us a list and give us. And he said, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. And
he protected so many people.
Yeah, and that just kind of blows me away though, because there were so many people that were involved, that were your clients, or that were wanting purchases, wanting to buy bottles from you. I mean, you had some pretty exclusive people, right?
Yes.
I mean, lawyers,
elected
judges.
State
so for people that aren't from Kentucky that are listening to this, I mean, Frankfort is our state capital. So all the elected officials every year, watch that microphone, Toby.
I'm not used
It'll jump out and get you every time, man. But elected officials from all across the state are there.
They want bourbon
for session, and they come in and they want bourbon. They want bourbon to drink themselves, so they want it to take back and give to their big spenders, their donators, or whatever. So you're right in the epicenter of that, correct? I mean, you had a lot of people.
You're right. And the thing is, as I look back, I get to thinking about things, and I'm like, it started out, taking that shot of whiskey with those guys, starting to take shots during the day, taking, some barrel whiskey home, getting into shipping. You know, oh, well, you can take this home, enjoy this with your friends, and then you start taking bottles here and there, and then the next thing comes a little bit of money. Then look where I'm at now.
Yeah,
I mean, I look back on that and I'm like, it doesn't even seem surreal that it happened like that.
It's a slippery slope.
Well, I saw, and like, I did not know what Toby was involved in. I do now because I've heard his story so many times. But the day that the sheriff was questioning Toby, and he said, "If you tell me about tell me about Pappy, and I'll make all this go away." There was a fear that I saw on Toby's face. That's when I realized he's in trouble. I told him, that's when I told him to shut up.
He said, "If you got any Van Winkle here?" And I was like, I said, "No, man, I ain't got no Van Winkle." He said, you know anything about that 2013? And I was like, "No, I really don't." I said, I may have an idea, but I said, I don't know anything, conclusive on it.
Yeah.
But he was like, "Well, if you can tell me anything, he
make
said,
it all go away."
And just like, and that's exactly how.
And I was right there on the porch when
and
he
I
did
said,
that.
"How in the hell can you make?" He said, "I can make anything disappear."
And that's when I said, "Shut up! I'm calling an attorney right now."
Well, I mean, I don't blame you because obviously they're.
But then they pulled him aside even after I called the attorney. I said, "Shut up! I've called the attorneys, and he does not want you to talk till he gets here." They pulled him aside, away from my house, away from me, and started talking to him.
When she said that, Pat kind of looked. He looked at Jake, which is the jailer now. Jake pulled me over to the side and said, "Look, man, I don't think you're a bad guy." He said, "But times like," he said, "but let me tell you, the shit has hit the fan." And he said, "The only way it's going to help yourself if you talk to me." And I said, "Well, my wife done got a hold of an attorney." He said, "The attorney's not going to help you. I'm the only one can help you. You need to talk to me for that attorney."
And I went out there and said, "Shut the F up."
Yeah, good cop.
Man, he just kept on.
A good cop, bad cop kind of
thing.
Oh,
it's what they are, yeah.
So it was,
And I was going to say, and to interject here, like that really, when I asked you like about the cases of Eagle Rare, and then like you were talking about the bottles of Pappy, you weren't selling them for $2,000. It all really makes sense now, because initially watching the show, I'm like, well, how would Julie not know if he's making $2,000 a bottle? That's a lot of money. I know, like in my house, if I had $2,000, my wife would be like, "Who did you kill? Where did you get that?"
Right.
I'm an attorney. If I came home with $2,000 in my pocket,
but that's the thing. I never saw any cash. I never.
Right.
No, if there was whatever money that changed hands, never hit my account. Never paid those bills. It went to stuff that he'd pay cash for without me knowing. And I think there's one story that Toby has told that he went to give money to. Sorry, I'm not supposed to say that name, Mama. Give money to somebody, and he said, I think he was going to give you money. And you said, "No, Julie doesn't know anything. Don't do that."
Yeah, it's a friend of ours.
They didn't want to pass money to me because I didn't know.
I was doing dumb stuff, but I wasn't stupid.
I would have asked this guy, "Why are you giving him money?"
Right. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
So, but he said, "Don't give it to Julie."
But that, like you said, Philip. I mean, I think a lot of people that know bourbon, and for me and other people that were like, "Man, if you're selling bottles of Eagle Rare and you're making because now I'm thinking secondary prices, you know, where people were selling freaking bottles of Blanton for $150, and people were selling bottles of 23-year-old Pappy for $2,500, and so I'm thinking, how are you making all this cash and not and Julie, you're not aware of it. I mean,
they made it sound like so much money, and when they broke into the safe, it was what, $3,600. It was less than $4,000 in the safe.
Well, in Pat's interview, he was like 300 bottles for $1,000 a piece, and one of the reporters said, "Well, Pat, that's over $300,000. Did you find any of that?" "We found $3,700 of it." And I said, "That never happened." They was looking what it was. We were sitting at work, me and some guys, and they were talking about how much it went up after that heist.
Sure.
So I was looking at it on my phone. I was like, "Can you believe this?"
Oh, it's crazy what's happened to the market. There's a secondary, well, even retail pricing, but I won't even talk about that.
Right, well, I'm not at liberty to say right now, but I will tell you a little later. The secondary market when I was in the game compared to now, it's going to blow you away.
Okay, all right.
We're going to have another invite.
Yeah.
That'll be great. So I want to ask another question because we're at the end of round 2. I'm looking at the timer, but so you're doing bottles and whatnot, and then the opportunity though for barrels kind of presents itself, right?
Well, which I knew Sean from the gym.
Julie's like biting her lip.
Let me take it back. I met Sean,
but we know Sean.
Right, he's a part of the indictment,
Sean's from the
he's
story,
a part of the
right?
story.
Yes, right.
I met Sean. We went to Daytona Beach. I went with my uncle, and Sean. I'm trying to think how this worked out. Sean was friends with my uncle's guitar player. He had a little band, and he worked at Wild Turkey. And so Sean went to Daytona Beach, and that's the first time I met Sean. Sean's a little older than us. So after I got to meeting him, we all lifted. And it was like there was 4 of us. It was Sean, Mike Wells, and Todd Bryant.
Okay.
We lifted weights. We done the body shaving, the spandex shirts. We hit the clubs, Lexington, Louisville.
Sure.
And we all played a little. Sean played a little ball, not a lot. He was, like I said, he was a little older, but that's how I got to know Sean. I work at a distillery, he worked at a distillery. We know how it is. We talk about whiskey and all that, and then he made the comment one time about getting a barrel, and I'm like, really? I said, how the hell do you get a barrel? And he was just he said, I can just get. So it went from when people would call, and I said, man, the only thing I might be able to get you a barrel,
right?
And it went from that, and then like you said, the slope just kept going.
Yeah, right.
But I never asked. I don't know. And, people's asked me. I said, that's something you have to ask Sean. I said, only thing I can tell you, and I said, this is something that, Whitney Lawson kept telling me, shut up. You don't need to be saying that. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And I asked her at least 20 times to subpoena the records from Wild Turkey. Wild Turkey till this day has had numerous in and out of house inventories. There's nothing missing and no sign of a break-in.
And again, if nothing's missing, or you charge and
Sure.
you took a deal, he's guilty of that crime.
So the barrels that we'll talk about that, but the barrels were Wild Turkey.
That's right. They had Wild Turkey on them, but the date, the lot number, and all that was spray painted out. But
Toby didn't do that part.
Right, right. So
he didn't take anything off that property. He received something.
Right, it was a receiving.
But I'm not saying it is or it isn't from Wild Turkey.
Who knows?
All I'm saying is
he got it from somebody else.
Right. They don't have anything missing, and a lot of people don't know this. Wild Turkey and Buffalo Trace never pressed charges against me.
Interesting.
That's
very interesting.
Yeah, and the only thing ever recorded missing that was ever, brought in was a 2013 Van Winkle, which now everybody knows, and I said it the whole time.
Wait, don't spoil round 3, man.
Okay.
Don't spoil round 3. Hold on. Save that thought.
One question here before we end the session.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
so with the way it was portrayed on the documentary, it looked like, because they had, the stand-in actors for you and your coworkers, it appeared that there was barrels taken from Buffalo Trace.
No.
And so there was no barrels from Buffalo Trace.
No, I don't know why they put that.
Okay.
No. Well, wooden barrels.
Yeah.
No wooden barrels.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question, Philip, because it did. I mean, if you watch this show, because they obviously recreated the scenes and whatnot, and the part where you and Sean,
loaded up. Yeah.
Yeah, loaded up. It's like, it makes it clear that it's Wild Turkey, but then there's other parts of the show where it's like, oh, I need 4 barrels or I need 8 barrels. And it's like you on a...
Kept coming. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you're putting stuff in your truck, but it doesn't say where it's coming from.
But that's another thing I want to touch on if I can.
Yeah.
And that was a question that I asked the producer when he showed the semi backing up to I said, that never happened.
Okay, yeah.
And he said, yeah. He said, well, it was in there. I said, I never said that. That never happened.
It's in the grand jury with Sean Searcy.
Okay.
Sean Searcy was in Sean Searcy's plea deal.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And he signed
That's a good place to end.
Alfred plea.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that said,
we're coming back.
Yeah, Julie. That's I'm just gonna step away and let you.
No, that's quite all right. You got it.
Yeah. No. The Bourbon Life Podcast with Julie Curtsinger will be
the Mrs. Bourbon King, right?
That's right.
Queen.
Yeah.
Oh, Queen. I'm a queen.
So we'll take a quick break, and we'll be back with more with Toby and Julie Curtsinger from the Netflix Docuseries Heist, the Bourbon King, in just a minute.
Three Chords line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The three-chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they called Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final session of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, not as always,
the Bourbon Hunting KY on Instagram.
That's right. Yeah, man. Let's get a plug for Philip and yeah, man. Welcome to the show, Philip.
Yeah. I'm glad to be here, and we're getting ready to get into session 3 with Toby and Julie Curtsinger, and this is, I guess, we're gonna talk about how everything went down with the arrest and the conviction, and find out where they're at now and how life's going. And
yeah, I think it's the conversation's been great, and we really appreciate you guys being here. Obviously, we had the chance to drink some good bourbon as well, so that's been a lot of fun. The first round we talked about your past, how you got involved with Ancient Age, Buffalo Trace, and working there, the culture there, and how that kind of led into things. And in the second round, we talked about how your clientele grew, how everything kind of happened. So now let's talk about how things kind of fell apart, because really I don't know that there's any better way to say things kind of fell apart. Right. So, can you talk a little bit about, the first question I had on my list, I just looked at it, was, in the show, they depict this woman. She's like very adamant. She's got a clipboard. She's walking around and she looks in the cage, and there's a missing box, and she's like, oh my gosh, there's a box of something missing. Can you kind of talk about really, what happened, what was going on at that period of time?
Well, that was, which actually I wasn't in shipping at that moment, at that time. So I'm pretty sure they had a new supervisor that had taken the job that they'd hired. And I really don't think that he was accustomed to how things were handled in-house.
Okay.
So when that came up, when they done inventory, because my understanding, the time I was in shipping, all the Van Winkle was kept over in shipping itself, the shipping department, the main area. Okay. So now they had started keeping the Van Winkle, like, I don't know, man, it was like 3 warehouses over, and they had it on a second floor in this cage, like a big chain link fence.
Okay.
And I believe, I think I'm correct on this, I may not be, but I think they bottle that years in advance, like maybe a couple years.
Okay.
So he knows how much he can allot out to sell.
Right.
So basically, while it's sitting there, you do inventory, nothing changes. So an individual, which, if you watch the documentary, worked there at that time, had keys to the doors that got on the second floor and also into the building, and the gate.
Okay.
So, at that time he was there, he had those. And, when, the 2013, or before, let me go back, before the 2013 came up, that he had bid out into processing. He was actually second shift processor.
Okay.
And from my understanding, which, had access to a golf cart. So my theory was during the nighttime hours while bottling was running, you could hook a bottling line up to a 10,000 gallon tank, and you could do whatever you wanted for a couple hours.
Oh, okay.
So when they done an inventory, or no, I take that back. I was told one of the guys was pulling an order, and he needed some cases. They had ran out in shipping. So he goes over to where the cases were stored. He goes in, and he lifts a pallet up to set it down to get some cases off, and the pallet he takes it off of, all the ones in the center was gone.
That's, I was going to ask you about that, because my wife had told me that she had heard that it was a pallet of cases, and the boxes on the outside of the pallet were intact, but that the center of the pallet was missing it, but you couldn't tell from looking at the outside of the pallet, but the boxes in between were gone.
That is correct, because if
my wife is a smart
Kudos, yes.
Well, no, if you're doing inventory each month, because they do inventory each month. So if you're just sitting there looking, unless you physically take that pallet down, you're not going to know that. So over a period of time, which the McCara, which was one of the main supervisors at Buffalo Trace time, she even gave a statement. She thought it was done over a period of time. So, and I do believe it, because see, and everybody took stuff down there. But no one knew over in shipping, because I was talking to a couple of the guys that I still knew, and I was asking them. I I said, who took that? And he was like, well, we don't know. Well, one of the guys got to asking me if such person had access to a golf cart. And I said, yes. Could they leave at a certain time? I was like, yes. And they said, that's who took it. But the new supervisor, instead of keeping it in-house which I'm assuming was David was a supply chain manager.
Okay.
He called the sheriff's department and said they had someone.
There was a theft.
So he's the one that got it started. He didn't follow procedure.
I gotcha. Yep. So then the new sheriff in town, Pat Melton, who is the Franklin County Sheriff, which is where Frankfort is located, Franklin County, he gets involved. Was he an outsider? Was he from? Okay, he wasn't from.
He's originally from the Louisville area.
I shouldn't say an outsider, but because he's from Kentucky, but he's an outsider.
That's Indiana.
Okay,
no, I'm not. I got a lot of friends in Louisville. But yeah, and he done some time, from my understanding, in state government, and then he went to the Versailles Police Department.
Okay,
and then which
Versailles is right beside
Woodford County. Yes,
yeah.
And then
Woodford
he
County
came
right
over and
Franklin.
he was. I think he was like a detective or something. I'm not sure before he got sheriff.
So then he decided he wanted to run for sheriff of Franklin County, right?
Yes.
So he was a sheriff. So he gets involved at that point in time. So this is 2013. You've had your arrangement, your situation. Things have been going on for you probably about 5 years, I guess, right? Between the time you had your friend that wanted some bottles.
Mm-hmm. So it's probably a little longer than that.
Okay,
but it was it wasn't like every week and all that.
Right. So, but you had been providing your clientele, for lack of a better word. I mean, you've been providing bottles for a few years.
Yeah.
When this happened, so this investigation launches, was there something in your mind? Did you think, there's a problem here?
No, man, we were sitting. Actually, I work with 3 guys that was in building 3 I worked with, and we were talking about it. And we were like, I was like, well, I said, they don't really know over in shipping. I said, it could have been anybody coming there. I said,
right.
but it had to be someone with access to that second floor, because they're fire doors. I mean, they're like really thick. You got to have a key to get in there. And the only other way was elevator, or there was a big hole cut in the floor where they could put pallets up. But
right.
You still had to have someone else. But I was sitting there talking about it, because, I mean, I didn't work in shipping. No one I knew. And I had no idea. I was like, nobody's even come up and said, hey, I got some of this I need to get rid of or anything. So I really didn't know.
So you didn't know, you had no idea who that.
The only thing, we were sitting on the porch, Greg Anglin and I, at the beginning of a shift, because where he worked second shift, a lot of times he'd work over and he would filter things and he would leave that morning.
Sure.
And when all that went down, he made the comment to me. He was like, boy, I have some shit about that, all that going on. I was like, yeah. I said, yeah. I said, a lot of them guys don't even know. They ain't got a clue. And he was like, yeah, it kind of freaked me out. He said, I had 27 bottles of rye that I dumped down the drain at my dad's house. I looked at him. I'm like, rye? I was like, man, nobody likes rye. I was like, why did you? And he was like, well, it's just something that I had. It went on, and they kind of let out how many cases were missing. There was 27 bottles of rye that was missing. And I thought to myself, I was like, Greg's the one that took it, but
right.
I mean,
right.
Greg Anglin was. I mean, it wasn't a close friend. He was a friend. His daughter, he'd been to my house, the birthday party. His daughter spent the night at my house. His dad worked down there. I mean, I knew Greg. And what a lot of people don't understand, it's not a ratting culture, because everybody is in the same.
Sure, everybody.
I mean, everybody does.
They interviewed over 100 people and no one spoke up.
Well, that's what I was going to say
about taking anything, because if I tell
everybody's
you
guilty,
you're going to tell me out.
But that's what I was going to say, because on the show, on the docuseries on Netflix, I mean, they talk about that, the fact that Pat and his crew, the office, they interviewed over 100 some people.
Yeah. And no one spoke up.
And nobody said anything. So
that's how much of a cult it is.
I was going to say, so there's a culture, obviously, and we talked about that. I mean, and it's not just Ancient Age Buffalo Trace. It's all the distilleries that this kind of stuff was happening at.
Right.
But you work together, you're a team. I mean, you kind of consider yourself a family, I would assume, and you're not going to be like, yeah, okay, somebody took a bottle. Well, it's not a big deal. I mean, is that fair? I mean, okay.
So is it safe to say, at this point, you weren't necessarily even taking the bottles.
No,
you were the guy that if somebody took it, they were like, "Well, I've taken this, and now I need to make money."
Felicitator. Because hey, man, I told Whitney Lawson was my attorney at the time. I said, "Look, I didn't take the 2013, and that's all he's harking on." I said, "But if you want, I'll go in there tomorrow and I'll plead guilty to felicitation." I said, "I cannot deny that."
Yeah.
I said, back then, I said, I'd done some things.
But he never wanted to say he took the package.
I said, I didn't take the 2013.
Yeah.
I said, now when I was in shipping, did I take bottle? I said, yes, I did. I said, I can't deny that. I said, I took my share just like everybody.
But
that includes supervisors and everything.
But how do you go after a guy for stealing something when you know there's already been somebody given immunity for saying that they took it?
We'll get to that in a second, but definitely, so it gets to a point where Pat Melton, the sheriff, his office, they get a tip, an anonymous tip.
That's what they say.
Yeah. So I'm not going to ask you who that anonymous tip came from, but I'm sure you probably, I would assume you probably know.
We do know.
So was there a point where, so that was 2013. So was there a point where you say, wait, I need to kind of back up what I'm doing myself? Or were you still in a position where you were helping people get rid of barrels and bottles and whatnot?
It kind of died down far as the bot because they got really tight on it. And there was one guy that was a processor, and he came up. He's like, "Hey man," said, "I know you can get rid of some stuff." And he said, I buried this stuff at my grandmother's barn. And I'm like, "What?" He said, I've got 8 cases.
Yeah, he said, I've got 8 in the ground.
Yeah, he said, I've got 8 cases. And it's he said some 20, some 15 year. He said some of them's got labels, some of them. I'm like, I looked at him. I was like, you buried. He was taking it off the line, and I said, well, let me see what I said. I know somebody that's really hitting me up hard, so I contacted them and I told him. I said, I looked at the bottles. I said the capsules and everything that's on them. I said I'll vouch for them. They are good. So I got rid of those. And other than that, except for the display bottles, everything went dead. I mean, you may get somebody every now and then have a bottle or something, but that's like we talked earlier about the price and stuff.
Right.
But mainly it was everybody was trying to get it, but it was mainly just the only thing I can help you out with was barrels.
But we were talking about the tip that the sheriff.
That's what it was.
The sheriff got. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay. So she gave me a number. She gave me a name. And I was like, well, I know that person, but I don't know him that good. Then she gave me another name, and I was like, you are shitting me.
But it was a language. When he read, we got to see everything that was
so you haven't seen
texted
all
to
that,
them.
have you?
No.
So we have documentation of that actual text. And Toby picked up immediately that
as soon as I seen it, I went.
His best friend, one of his best friends.
One of my best friends for 26 years.
That uses a certain term.
I got you.
That introduced me to steroids.
I got you.
That introduced me to a lot of things that I've seen do things that probably would have put him in prison.
Yeah.
But
now let me say, I disowned him 20 years ago. That was another ultimatum. You either like him or you like me.
I got you. Well, I think you made the smart choice.
Yeah, well, but then they went back somewhere along the lines of building some type of friendship up.
Right.
And 2 weeks before this happened, Toby said, "I'm going to go visit him. He had shoulder surgery. We're going to go say hello." And I'm a wife. I'm not going to babysit you. I don't,
right.
That's.
Well, the thing, and one of the things too, my kids knew him. My daughter, he was bald.
Called him Uncle.
Called him Uncle Onion. My son, we took him turkey hunting. We went fishing with him. He came to my mother's house and ate breakfast with us one morning when all this happened, just to see how everything was.
And well, you want to know what's going on. You want to be close to the situation. You want to stay tight.
Right.
Then I found out later, he tried to set up steroid deals with 3 other of our friends. And all that. He tried to burn so many people. And then he tried to deny it and all that. Then when it finally came out, now
knew who it was.
He's AWOL.
Yeah.
You don't see him.
So what happened that day? I mean, the sheriff, the office shows up, right?
We're at the gym. We're at the gym.
All right.
Toby, take over.
As a matter of fact, like I was telling you earlier, where I'd done the cordials, I'd made a batch of Firefly sweet tea that day.
Okay.
And I went to the gym, and I was actually doing a shoulder workout, and my phone rang, and it was our neighbor down the road, and she was like, "There are sheriff's deputies all over your front yard." And I went, "What?" She said, "Yeah, I just thought you ought to know." Well, then my phone rings again, and because Julie had already got the call, and it was my mother-in-law. She said, "Toby, here, somebody wants to talk to you." And I said, "Hello, yes, this is Sheriff Melton. Toby, you need where you at right now?" I said, "I'm in the gym." He's like,
"You need a mic."
He's like, "I need you. You need to get home ASAP." I was like, "Okay."
But again, our house was broken into Labor Day. And then, I thought it was a break-in when I got the call.
So you got,
there's a whole lot that a lot of people don't know.
But the constable sheriff kept calling me because he's a family friend of mine since I was 9 years old. And he kept saying, Julie, do you know anything about barrels on your property? Barrels. And I'm like, Richard, I know nothing about barrels. He was trying to get me to admit, which I didn't know anything. Right. Yeah. He was at my property calling to find out.
Let me explain something for everybody that knows. Julie, she works all the time. She stays in, and this was wintertime. I do all the yard work.
Behind the house.
I've got a shed. She doesn't go out. Yeah, she doesn't bring firewood in.
That's like my wife. She doesn't go. She doesn't go out in the yard.
We had 18 inches of snow. I'm not going anywhere.
Work.
No.
She's
park the car and go in. Right.
Yeah. That was the only time that anything was ever behind that building. Nothing was ever.
Well, and I do remember, and I'm sure your wife's sitting here with us, that there are certain things when you look back, you're like, maybe you should have asked more questions. But I have a trust with Toby after 20 years of being together that I'm not gonna, I've told our attorneys, if he's gonna cheat on me, he's gonna cheat on me.
Right.
If he's gonna do stuff, he's gonna do stuff, whether I know it or not. And so the day that he said that he was gonna go move a couch, he asked what time I'd be home. And I said, well, I've got to pick up Isabella. I was at the gym till 8. She got out 8:30. I'd be home about 9:30. He knew the timeline of where I was and what I was doing. He knew my timeline.
Oh, right.
That I'm not coming home till 9 or 9:30.
Right.
So he had time to go help move a couch with Sean Searcy.
Run up and see Sean in Richmond. I knew how long it took to drive. And
so it was, and that's what people have to understand. I was deceived. The lies is just like in an affair. I mean, sure. What he did to our family was horrible, and we are at a better place. But like I told you, I'm learning healing. I'm learning forgiveness,
and I have to live with that 24/7.
Sure, you do.
I'll live with that to the day I die. Yeah, I'm just being real.
No, and I appreciate that. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And Julie, I appreciate your honesty about that as well, because I'm sure it's not tough. So the investigation's ongoing. They're on your property. I mean, at that point, what's the thought process with you? I mean,
on the way there,
he had my son in the truck with him, and I had
Kate
my daughter. We were two separate vehicles leaving the gym.
But I was on my way. When I was on my way there, Richard called me also, and he was asking me, "Well, you know what they're looking for?" I was like, "No." He said, "Well, never mind. They found what they was looking for," and I'm like, "Man, so." Which at the time I called, which Mike was me and Mike were friends, and I called Mike, but he didn't answer his phone. So later on they tried to say that he tried to call me and warn me, but that was false. I was just trying to find out if he knew what was going on. So I pulled up, and I couldn't even get in my driveway. I pulled up
cars everywhere.
I pulled up to the access road. So I told Kate, I said, "You walk on down to your grandmother's." So I walked on up, and then they were like, "You need to come up here and talk to us," and all that. So they pulled me in the. Now, first, Pat's went on the deck. Pat was questioning, asked me this, and Farmer was going off. Well, what's these barrels and all this kind of stuff? And I was like, and I'm sitting there trying to process it, man. Because
sure,
I mean, it was just like, you walk right into it, and you got 3 or 4 guys asking you. I'm sitting there trying to think,
just drilling you.
What can I? I need to watch what I say. I need to. I'm sitting there thinking, I need to come up with something to get out. Get them out of here. And
we didn't realize how big it was.
No,
sure. I was going to ask that question because I'm like, obviously, was that 2015?
15, yes. March 11th.
March 11th, 2015.
This is 2 years after
the day of infamy.
Yeah, the 2 years after the Pappy Gate, right?
Right, yeah, absolutely.
So
watch the timeline.
Right. So did you make the connection at that point that they're going to try to pin?
No.
Try to pin.
I still was like the ignorant wife. I mean, when I showed up, that he was already, when I got to the house, because he made it first. When I got there second, I had no clue. So he was smart enough to send my son to my mom's.
Right.
He knew something. I mean, he knew what he'd done.
Sure, right.
So he sent my son to my mom's, who lives next door. I walk in the house with my daughter. And at that time, she was 9 years old, clinging to my leg, crying. I mean, they destroyed my property. Yeah. And I have Kentucky State Trooper friends. My best friend was retired from KSP. And she said, there's a nice way to search people's homes.
Sure.
And then there's a damaging, destroying way. They dumped everything out and it had snowed, so everything was muddy outside. So they tracked through the house, walking on all of our stuff. Bella's crying. And I said, Detective Quarles said, was asking questions. I said, let me get her off my property. Let me get her. I mean, she's wrapped around my leg, crying. I said, let me get her off my property and I'll answer anything you want me to answer. Because I didn't know anything.
Right.
And so they'd already taken my cell phone and I reached for the house phone. And he said, if you pick up that phone, I'm going to cuff you. And I went on to get my daughter off my property.
Wow.
I reached for the phone and I took my chances. I called Mom and said, come get her now off my property.
Right.
And all I could hear was Qualls in the background saying, get me a set of cuffs now. And I thought, here it goes. I'm going to be cuffed. Yeah. And he did not touch me at that point. Mom came and got her off the property. But, you know, if I could see any changes in law enforcement for what we had go on with our family, number one, you knew I had 2 kids.
Sure.
Number 2, as the sheriff of the town, why wouldn't you have somebody sitting there saying, don't take your kid in the house, let her stay out here and play, and you go in.
Yeah.
Don't let her expose, because I've put them in therapy because of what they've seen and what they dealt with.
You know, on the show, they depict.
It's horrible.
They depict that they come in and ransack the house.
They did.
So I was going to really ask.
Ransack's a good word.
I was going to ask, was that pretty?
Yes.
Was that pretty?
Yes.
Okay.
At the time, we had a Saint Bernard that was her brother's.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that part.
You know, you let dogs out.
My brother died, so I took his dog.
And, you know, they do their business. Well, it was muddy.
Yeah.
They'd walked everywhere, and when they dumped our clothes out, I'm not kidding you, they walked all over our clothes.
It took me, I don't even know how many weeks it took for me to pick up.
But
just to even get the energy to get up and clean the house.
Sure. So you end up, basically they get the phone records, right? They get your phone records.
That's what destroyed him.
And that was...
it killed me.
There was a lot of text messages and whatnot on there. We don't have to go into detail, but obviously that was enough for them to go ahead and press charges, right? So,
yes.
So you're arrested and charged?
Yeah. Well, after, what was it, a month, they kept threatening us. Which I got took in that night.
Right. Okay. That's what threw me. Sorry. That's why I was quiet.
Longest night of my life.
Yes. He was arrested immediately on my property. I called our attorney when I realized that he was in trouble. When Pat Melton was telling Toby, if you tell me about Pappygate or whatever it was, Toby, that if you tell me I can make all this go away, I was a part of that. I can make all this go away. And I've known him for a long time, and I just saw this. He doesn't shut up much, and he loves everybody. And that was just that look on his face. I'm like, I'm calling our attorney. Yeah. And that was the point. And then they still hounded him, even after I said.
So at that point, though, I'm glad you said that, because, he's questioning you, and he knows that there's certain evidence that he's found or whatever.
Right.
But then he's like, tell me about Pappygate. What do you know about Pappygate? So even at that point, Pat Melton knew that you weren't probably the Pappygate person.
Well, and I remember Pat walking me back where Toby's shed was during all this when they were on my property, and he looked at me and said, "How's your marriage?" Well, really?
Wow.
Right. What do you mean? How? Well, we are married. We have problems.
Sure.
We're not perfect. It was just the weirdest question of the moment. Well, did you know what was behind your property? What's here? And I'm like, I did not know anything of that was back there.
So you get charged, and then eventually, obviously, you pled guilty. Julie, you did an Alford plea.
I did do an Alford plea, yes.
To misdemeanor charges, correct?
Yes.
So it was amended down. But Pat was very adamant, Pat Melton, the sheriff. It was like a daily thing. Because I lived here in Kentucky, obviously. I was an attorney here in Lexington, and it was every day about Pappygate.
We got
kind of like our governor with the coronavirus.
Well, yeah,
but we got up and you would go to Kroger and there's the State Journal being sold and your face is on the front page.
Right.
You would turn on the news to watch TV with your kids and kids sitting there. There's your dad in an orange jumpsuit. There's CNN. It was headline. It was bigger than just local. It was nationwide news that we were hammered over this whole deal.
Yeah.
It was horrible. And I told my kids, we have to pick up our heads. This happened on a Wednesday. I told them they were going to school on Thursday, and they said, we can't. And he was in jail that night, Wednesday night, and I just grabbed my babies. We, out of all movies, watched Ouija, which was they like scary movies. And it had just came out, so we rented the Ouija, and we had a sectional couch in the living room at that time, and we just snuggled up and we all slept in there. And at the moment I said, you're going to school tomorrow. We got school tomorrow. We got work tomorrow. Because I still hadn't grasped how big this was.
Sure.
And they said, no, we can't, Mom. And so I said, okay, we'll get your daddy home. I'll go tomorrow and we'll bring him home and we'll deal with it. So Thursday night was a conversation to the kids, okay, we didn't choose this, but this is our new normal.
Right.
And we are going to be okay. We have to pick our heads up on Friday. I have to go back to work. You have to go back to school. The longer we set out of facing these things, the guiltier we look and the more talk there is about us. So we need to face the demons now, because I thought by Monday it would be gone. This was Friday. I really thought by Monday it would be gone. And so I sent the kids back to school, and I met with both principals, both counselors, and said, hey, if anything happens, you let me know. And I told the kids, it's not a free ride to come home, but if you get to school and you need me, I'm coming.
Yeah.
But don't just call me to call me. Let's try to make it through the day the best we could.
Sure.
And I had to meet in front of gym members and tell them that, this is us. I had clients that supported. I have 2 clients who supported me with attorney fees that paid for me to be represented. Yeah, they stood up. They're elderly, one's no longer with us, but had our back.
And it was an everyday thing. It was social media. It was press releases. It was press conferences. It was
losing jobs.
Yeah, and it was about him trying to depict you as the
Pappygate,
the ringleader of the Pappygate.
Well, as I told you earlier, as what Whitney told me, he made me Franklin County's
number one.
Public enemy number one.
So on the documentary, it portrays that you were the kingpin of an organized. It honestly, it made it feel like I was watching an episode of mobsters, or because they had all the lines.
Right.
Like they made it out to be like you were this king of an organized crime ring that was just terrorizing the city. So what?
Oh, I know, man. I know. I can laugh about that now.
But that's the way it comes across. And so I want to ask, was it really even that organized, or was it just some
There's
guys?
Nothing organized.
Right.
You talked to us all afternoon. Nothing organized.
Yeah, and that's what I
we want the viewers to know that.
Yeah, and I feel like with the culture that was at the distillery, it comes across to me that knowing everything we've talked about today, that there was no organization to it.
They
it was
did
just,
that. Well, and that's why they had to pull me and my dad in. You have to have, you're an attorney, 5 people or 6 for
the RICO.
Is it 5 or 6?
I'm not sure what.
Okay, so they have to have X amount of players to be a whatever crime.
Right.
So to pull me and my dad in, that created that circle.
And they went after your dad.
They did.
Yeah, for something Greg Anglin said.
Yeah. So that's good. So let's kind of talk about the aftermath now, because this is where we are. Everything happened. It was 2018. You were sentenced to 15 years, and you got shock probation, which I know some people were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he got 15 years and only served 30 days on shock. People that don't understand what shock probation is for. It is for people like you, people that are non-offenders, first-time offenders, people that have families, people that have jobs, people that are good members of society that work hard, that do their thing, but make a mistake. So, you get the shock probation. But talk about where things are now with you personally, with you guys both together as a couple. Can you do that for us?
No, go ahead.
Why are you looking at me? Like I said, it's been a long, hard journey. And like I told him the other day, the first 50 years might have sucked, but the next 50 might be okay. So our struggle's real.
Sure.
It hurts. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I have been married for almost 21 years, and I tell people it's been 17 of the best years of my life.
17, there you go. And again, through the whole marriage and whether you stay or go, and I said there's a moment when all that was happening, do I leave?
Sure.
And it took not just a moment.
I didn't blame her if she did.
Right.
It took, it was probably years that I wasn't still sure I was staying. Like it still was so Our home was tore apart. I'm not talking about what the sheriff's department did, but
physically, but just
us. Yes.
The
kids saw it. The
Sure.
kids are still like, y'all are together, but you're not happy. So the kids are still paying a price that we stay together.
Right.
But yet they saw staying together didn't mean you're happy.
Right. Right.
So I want them to see the next part where it's going to be okay.
You move on and things are good.
Right. And I've told people, when I did this and I chose to stay, I said, I'm a Christian. I'm a Baptist. Our church dropped us through all this stuff.
Sure.
So it was another huge loss.
Right.
But I said, no, I'm not going to cry. But
no, that's okay.
It is emotional for those that don't know us.
Right.
But I said, my vows to God.
Sure.
You say it to him, but
Right.
Who's your vow really to?
Right.
It's to God.
Right.
That I will be there, better or worse,
Better
sickness,
or worse.
health,
Right.
whatever.
Sure.
And, it's easy to choose to run and leave. That's
Right.
easy. He talked about suicide, and I had to say, I'll stay and I'll walk with you.
Right.
But if you kill yourself and leave me with these kids to deal with suicide,
Yeah.
that's a whole other issue
Right.
that I can't do. Can't.
Right.
And trust me, I thought about suicide during this point too.
I'm sure. And I'm sorry. I understand. I mean, and a lot of people out there probably understand when you get to a point in your life, and Toby, obviously you were there as well. You kind of expressed that in the show. And Julie, I understand where you're coming from. So it's not easy. I mean,
No.
it's not at all. So, the impact on you, Toby. I mean, obviously, Julie, it had a tremendous impact on you. It still does, understandably. Toby, what about yourself?
I'm in that same boat. When all that, a lot of people don't understand. A lot of them look at it and go, you got off lucky. This wasn't all that. Just like you and I were talking earlier, the amount of pressure from the media that they kept applying, and which was a contained media by Pat, Pat and Zach Becker, and just every day. And when I go back and I watch the documentary now, and I watch my kids, picking my son up from junior high, watching, and something that Julie didn't share with me. Well, my daughter, she got bullied through school all the time. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And I look back on that, man. If you know me.
Yeah,
I'm not mean to anybody. I don't mistreat people. I'll talk to a homeless guy just as much. I'll talk to a millionaire.
Sure.
And I think about my kids. And, I got to live with that, and that kills me. And it gets easier as time goes on. I got to be. I think you got to be strong. I don't want to see my kids. I don't want my kids to see me cry.
Sure.
I want to be strong for them.
Yeah.
And I want to bounce back. I want them to be proud. And it was Julie. I know she took a ton. I got to hide out for 3 or 4 months until I went to work for my aunt and uncle painting. But she had to go in and face her gym members.
Gym members, yeah, sure.
And I know a lot of people don't. They'll look at this and go, whatever. But it just, unless you stood in our shoes and felt this, and I take responsibility. If I hadn't have been doing what I was doing, none of this would have happened.
Sure.
But it was very hard, man. I would not wish this on anybody.
No.
And the thing with the suicide stuff, I don't think people really get this, but the amount of pressure that was put on us,
it's awful.
Everybody entertains that.
Sure.
At some point in anyone's life, if you're honest, following through with it, I kind of doubt it, but with everything going, you're sitting there going, man, it would be so much easier.
Much easier.
They would leave. They would leave my wife alone, my kids.
But they wouldn't have. I don't think they would have.
He'd have kept going. He didn't. Not one time did the sheriff's department or the Commonwealth attorney did they ever take into consideration my kids.
Yeah.
Not one time.
Not when they're on the property and not having somebody
not
out there.
One
for
time.
them.
And that was another thing that Derek said. Pat told him that there was no kids on the property at the time.
Isabella was wrapping up my leg.
Well, and I said it earlier, Toby, and I come back to that when I talk about the fact that I think you and I are very similar people. I think we've been, not that I've been through what you've been through, but I think that I understand where you are, where you have been, more than you probably know.
But that's what we want people to do. That's why we appreciate them.
And I can step in and say too, I have a daughter, I have a wife, I get it.
Sure.
You would do anything for them.
Sure.
Putting a roof over their head, making money, times get tight.
Sure.
I get it. There's been times when we've struggled. So yeah, like finding some way to pay the bills or, I definitely understand that. And I think it's good that, you're here, you're telling us about it because, you see a TV show come out and it's like, oh, there's this crime guy. He's like he's the Pablo Escobar of bourbon and life was all good. And,
right.
Now they're crying because it's, they got arrested. It's not, they got caught. But I get it. I'm from Frankfurt. People struggle. I'm a state worker. I don't make that much money.
But that's what makes our story real, Philip.
Yeah,
is that we are that. Well, we're your neighbors. We're next door to you. We're Frankfurt.
Right.
We are.
And Philip, like
locals.
Good talking to you. I know your dad. I know your uncles. I worked with your grandparents. I love your family, man. They're good people. And what I want a lot of people to understand too. I don't want you feeling sorry. I don't want anybody feeling sorry for me.
Yeah.
I made my choices. If you want to feel sorry for my kids and my wife and my family,
sure.
They're the ones that took the blunt of what I do.
Yeah, 100%. And and I get that, and I'm glad that you said that, and I respect that because it is them really that are the ones that are affected.
Well, and hopefully when people when families choose to do things that are illegal, you have to think about how it's going to impact your family if you are caught.
Sure.
And that's what I've told Toby. I said, the moment you put barrels on my property, it changed everything. Everything.
Never thought anything was going to happen.
But he chose to do that.
Yeah. So, it's kind of weird because as I've researched this show and thought about how we're going to conduct the interview, because it is different for us, what we're doing here. This is not our normal show. My wife's laughing over there in a corner because it's not,
You're just glad she's glad to sit in and listen to us. Look at her.
Yeah. But it's been a great show. And I really appreciate it. And I wasn't sure how we were going to, address everything. And some of the things that I saw, people were saying, well, he's not remorseful. Oh, he's remorseful because he got caught. But it's apparent. It's obvious, man. There's no question about what impact this has had on your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your kids, and your children in general, and your life as a whole. So, anybody that would doubt that, I would tell them, you're not right.
Yeah. Everything changed.
Sure. But you've met us.
Right. And another thing too, it was really, we were going to Buck Run Church and I was really struggling with that. And, like I said, I can't be doing this stuff and I can't be doing this stuff. And I'm not putting the blame on anybody else because I made the choice. But I mean, my God, man, you wouldn't believe the people that started calling me just constantly, and people bringing stuff. And then I'm like, well, if I'm not, and it's stupid. I was like, well, if I'm not taking it, then it's really not me.
Right. Sure. You're facilitating
which is what he said he's done all along.
Right. No, I get it.
Yeah.
But like when you have a church family, we taught Sunday school. Like we were teaching little girls.
I feel
Sunday
like a
school.
hypocrite.
But
here's the thing, Toby. I mean, man, we've all done stuff in our life. All right, so we've obviously surpassed our time, but
I like because you have Toby Curtsinger on the thing; he can talk forever.
No, that's great. I think you've surpassed Fred No in terms of our of talking. So congratulations on that. But we should probably do another episode of this at some point. But before we close it out, is there anything that you all just want to share with our listeners, just to let them know?
Don't judge a book by its cover and the choices they make.
Okay.
Get to know us better, and you'll see that we fell and we fell hard.
Sure.
But we want to rise stronger.
Yeah, and there's always more to
a story,
to something you see. Well, I'm going to go back to my former president.
God, we're already up on time.
Donald Trump.
Here we go.
There's a lot of fake news, and I do believe that.
Sure.
A lot of things were put out. A lot of things were stretched. I mean, and there's more to the documentary.
Until you're in the situation, you don't know how deceptive everything is.
Right. Sure.
That's true. And then,
a
lot of things I thought when I was looking at from a legal standpoint, I'm like, well, no, that's not right. Well, that got totally twisted. And now I kind of, growing up in America, I always thought everybody was
the American flag,
innocent to proven guilty, but I don't think that's the case. It's not the case.
No, I had to get an attorney to prove innocence.
Yeah, which is crazy. I mean, and I'm sorry you guys have gone through that, but I mean, obviously there were consequences for actions.
Yes,
that's true.
We agree.
We all know that, and you guys agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you guys have gone through, because of some overzealous people, was pretty extreme. That's just my own personal opinion. So I just want to throw that out there.
One of the federal agent I talked to, he made the comment. He said, you've owned up to the things you've done wrong, and he said, I respect that. He said, but I'm going to say one thing. He said, we as law enforcement, we don't break the law to enforce the law. Just remember that. I mean, and that's something, and that's why I tell everybody, watch the documentary.
Yeah.
And think about it. Watch it again. You'll pick up things. I mean, there's a lot of things. A lot of people that was just like the Pappygate guy.
Right.
That was discovered within the first 2 months of the investigation.
Sure.
Why was that not disclosed?
No,
we were in this fight for 3. I think I took my plea 3 years into it.
Yeah, I mean, it
was a law. It wasn't just an overnight thing for the audience that doesn't know that
right,
it wasn't
right.
6 months or 2 months. It was a 3 month, and my son had a conversation with my daughter about them going to foster care, who would take care of them if both parents went to prison.
Yeah.
And I said, nothing's going to happen to me. I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
But he was so afraid of foster care that when I took my plea deal, I hugged him and said, I'm okay.
Sure.
I'm here for you. And we're going to make sure Dad's okay too.
Yeah.
Which was a whole other story. But
right. Well, you know what? I mean, honestly, we appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you for having us
100%.
so much. Yes, thanks,
it's
Philip.
Been a great
thanks, Mark.
It's been a great conversation. Enjoyed getting to know you guys and enjoy the opportunity to talk with you. And I'm glad you guys you felt comfortable enough to open up and share with us and our listeners. I really appreciate that. So, Philip, before we close it out, anything you want to add?
I mean, I'm glad that you all came and told your side of the story apart from what was on the documentary, because the documentary, yes, it showed that Toby wasn't the one that actually stole the the initial Pappy. Of course he did, there was bourbon involved, but it wasn't that. But it really drew it in so that to comprehend it wasn't near as much money, because like I said, I got into bourbon in 2018, so in my bourbon mind, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, man, it's like, he was just rolling in the dough. And I'm like, $3,000 for a barrel of wild turkey. That's...
Sure. Yeah, totally different.
So it definitely totally changes the story and the narrative that was out in the news, to make it to where it's like, man, 15 years. Yeah, that's for what actually transpired versus what was portrayed. It was definitely eye-opening for sure.
Yeah. And again, we appreciate you guys being here. So I'm going to thank our sponsors. Again, the Stave Restaurant out there on McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky. Go visit those guys. Just making some great food out there and a great place to hang out on their treehouse deck on the banks of
the triage.
Well, it is. It's a tree.
It's
a
wonderful.
Treehouse,
He's
right?
not been there yet.
Okay. All right. So it's a beautiful place. You've been there, Julie. So
I have.
Yeah. And 3 Chord Bourbon. We appreciate their sponsorship as well. And everything they're putting out up there. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up. Send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.